So India has just successfully hosted the G20. The New Delhi Declaration was something that was received very well across nations. India's stock amongst the Global Committee of Nations is certainly rising. To try and make sense of what is the trajectory of this relationship, particularly when it comes to India and the West. I'm now joined by a very, very special guest. Ambassador Philipp Ackermann is the ambassador of Germany to India. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on CNN News 18 and for coming to our offices, making the trek all the way to Noida.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. So let's start off with the current state of the India-Germany relationship. How would you describe the state of the relationship as it exists right now? I believe the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have met on more than one occasion in the last 1 year. There are other big visits lined up in the next few months. What, according to you, is the state of the relationship currently?
I think it's not exaggerated to describe them as at an all-time high, I would say, the India-German relations. We've seen in many areas of common interest, we see improvement and intensification of our relations and cooperation. So I just want to mention when it comes to climate change, when it comes to the tackling the challenges with coming along with climate change, but also when it comes to a new chapter in our politics, it's migration. So we have agreed on the migration partnership with India, and Germany is in need for a lot of people with skilled labor on many levels, and India is a very interesting country to look at that time, and the Indian government has been very cooperative and supporting in this. So I think there are many things where Germany and India work in a very close way and can come to very fruitful and good achievements.
So the G20 summit, which happened recently in Delhi, and the fact that they got a joint declaration and all sides were able to agree upon the language, particularly on the Russia-Ukraine war, what are your thoughts? What are Germany's thoughts on how it came about? Because there was some sort of sense that the language on the war, for example, was diluted.
So let me start by saying I think India can be very happy with this G20 presidency. I must say, German visitors, German high-ranking officials who came here were all during the whole year, they were very impressed with the Indian performance. And I can tell you that I don't think the language is so diluted. I think on the Ukraine war, the language is very clear, very specific. And unlike Bali, which was a very good declaration also to start with, but the Delhi Declaration has the agreement of everybody. That's in these multilateral fora, it makes a bit of difference whether you have 18
Correct.
and 2 or you have 20. So basically, again, great admiration goes out to the team around Prime Minister Modi who managed to come up with the declaration, which is, and I have to say that at this point also not only about Russia and Ukraine, it has so many other very important areas tackled in a very constructive way, so that my Chancellor went home with the greatest satisfaction.
One of the things that came to the fore during the course of those negotiations, during the course of the G20, was this revival of the idea of the global South. And especially at a time like this, when there is deep differences between East and West and North and South, the idea of the global South with countries like India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, how does Germany look at the global South?
So let me start by saying, personally, I have a bit of a difficulty with the notion of global South. But what is global South? Is it the countries you were just naming, or is it, what is Singapore as well as Malawi in the global South? It doesn't do enough justice to the diversity of the Southern Hemisphere, I would say, when you talk about global South. But having said that, I would say there is a certain idea of southern nations, of emerging nations, that go together. And you rightly mentioned Indonesia, South Africa, and Brazil. The 4 presidencies in a row with India. And I think one of these coups the Indian government had when they negotiated this declaration was that at the very end, Amitabh Kant came with the document and said, this is a language developed by South Africa, by Indonesia, by India, and by Brazil. And this is a language, if you are not happy with it, call the Prime Minister. And this is, I think that was the breakthrough.
Okay.
And there you see that these emerging countries have a weight, they have a certain weight. And I think it is in our interest to reach out as much as we can to them. And when you say, India has a certain charisma in this area of the world, in this region of the world, that's certainly not wrong. I think that's the case.
Let's talk about the bilateral relationship. I want to talk to you about, for a number of years now, we've been going on about this FTA negotiations between India and the European Union. I just want to know, is there progress there? Because India has been picking and choosing its FTAs. I think they signed one with Australia some time back, one with the Middle East, with UAE, but reluctant to get FTA going with other countries. What is the status of the FTA negotiations?
So I think we have seen progress. We have seen rapprochement of both sides, but I think it's also fair to say that there's still a way to go. Now, I think when you do an FTA with Europe, it is an extremely rewarding FTA because you have the biggest market, the biggest international market, but it's also a very complicated one because you have 27 member states sitting on. And I'm saying that, of course, India has also its conditions and its clear priorities, but the Europeans are a difficult partner to deal with. Let me tell you that Germany is extremely interested. For us, an FTA with India would be a complete game changer. Our industries, machine production, but also car maker, would be benefiting enormously and would, with no doubt, investing a lot more in India with an FTA than without an FTA. We have started to make good business in India already, but now I think with an FTA that would be really a booster for German investment in India.
You mentioned earlier about the Russia-Ukraine war in the context of the G20 document. What is your assessment of where the war stands right now? The feeling seems to be, it's been a year and a half now, it's going to be close to 2 years next February, that Ukraine is not in a position to win this war. Is that an assessment that you share?
I don't share this assessment because it's very difficult to make a judgment right now. What we see is that the Ukrainian offensive is advancing, albeit in small steps. They have managed to hit the Russian side in very sensitive moments when it comes to the fleet and. But on the other hand, you don't see a huge major breakthrough of this offensive. I don't see any readiness to negotiate from the Russian side right now. So I am afraid that this war will be with us for quite a while. But I think the Russian side is hoping that at one stage Europe and the West will give up supporting Ukraine. I think that's a hope that for the time being I feel rather illusionary. I think there is quite a decisiveness and determination to support Ukraine as much as one can in order to preserve the international order as we know it. This is a war of aggression. This is a land grab war. And we cannot accept that wherever that is in Europe or elsewhere, that a big country invades a smaller one and takes land. I mean, you have in your immediate neighborhood also countries that are more and more aggressive. And I think we have every interest to uphold the international order, and that means the safety and invulnerability, if one can say that, of borders. Yeah.
This is a quick question related to the war, because it sparks off from the war, because there is now data, according to Distatis, which is the official statistics agency in Germany, that Germany bought something to the tune of 450 million euros of re-exported gas from India, which was Russian oil that then refined here in India and re-exported back to Germany. This whole idea of not having to buy Russian oil. I know there was a larger learning for Germany through the course of this war, that you were far too dependent on one country for your energy needs. But now this, do you think it defeats that purpose?
No, I don't think so. Let me say that what was our intention was to say to the Russians, Germany, Europe, and Germany in particular, we were the most faithful clients of Russian oil. We paid the best price, and we were basically a continuous client of Russian fossil fuels, be that oil or gas, and that had to stop. And the Russians had to reorient their whole production, and it's still very difficult, But what that didn't mean is that Russian oil should disappear from international markets because we were not interested, also in the interest of the rest of the world, that oil markets should be disrupted. So if you read the documents the European Union put on the table very carefully, you'll find a clear reference to the fact that refined products of Russian descent or provenience can be purchased, and the refineries in India that work with Russian crude oil and sell their products in Europe, we don't have a problem with that. That's legitimate. What we don't want is direct oil and gas delivered to Germany, to Europe, that is consumed in situ.
You mentioned a moment ago about aggression in the neighborhood, and India has been a victim of that because of Chinese aggression. It's been going on for the last 3 years. What is the view from Berlin about aggressive Chinese behavior? Not just vis-a-vis India, you've seen what has happened in the South China Sea, around Taiwan. What is the view from Berlin as to how to tackle this problem, which is a problem for many countries here in Asia?
We see it with great concern. I think there is no secret. I mean, we see it with growing concern. Germany has committed to be more present in the Indo-Pacific also because of that. So China is for us, it's a very complicated partner in a way, because it's a partner economically, it's a competitor also economically, and it's a systemic rival at the end. So you might have seen that Germany has issued its first China strategy, dealing solely with China, exclusively with China. And there we have made, our commitments to how to tackle the three partner, rival, competitor levels when it comes to China. And it keeps being a big challenge, and we continue to observe this growing assertiveness in the region here. With Philippines, you've seen the Philippines lately, but also the other southern neighboring state, Vietnam and others, where we feel that the Chinese are really pushing the borders. And India, not to forget, with your experience with China.
I do want to ask you, there's the story domestically that's doing the rounds, again, connected to China, about Chinese funding and CCP funding into, propaganda, asking mainstream media outlets here in India for Chinese propaganda. Germany has also been a victim of this. So do you have any thoughts on countering Chinese fake news and Chinese propaganda?
So I can't tell about India because I don't know that. But in Germany, what we found out was a very, very aggressive outreach to universities, academic institutions, mostly through cultural institutions, Confucius institutes.
Confucius institutes.
So I think, to be very honest, for a long time we were a bit naive. And now we see more and more how propaganda has been planted also in these institutions. And now we are more alert. We are looking much closer into this matter. And I know that many cooperations between universities have been cancelled because of that. So it is an issue. We are dealing with that on a daily basis.
You're following this whole controversy between India and Canada. What is the view in Germany on this? Canada has made some public accusations about India being involved in the assassination of some extremist elements. India has said, provide the proof for the same. Has there been any conversations between Germany and Canada on this?
No, I don't think that there has been a conversation on this specific issue, and I don't see the German media being really very vocal about it. But what I say is that we do hope that both countries, Canada and India, are friendly countries. Canada with a huge minority of Indian descent, India with lots of people who go to study in Canada. There are so many interlinkages, so many connections. So we do hope that diplomacy will lead to a solution of this crisis, which is very, very unfortunate now.
Has there been any instances in Indo-German negotiations and talks where this issue of safe havens for extremists has been flagged?
Yes, we have, there is a very small Indian diaspora in Germany in comparison to Canada, let's say. And we have been talking with the Indian side constantly about this issue. Indian side has raised some concerns. I think it's not in the dimension with other countries where the Indian diaspora is much bigger. But we are aware of this problem, and we are dealing with it together with the Indian side.
In your view as a diplomat, and I'm not asking you to take sides or anything here, but how could this have been differently handled? Because public accusations against another country is not something that we see often in diplomacy.
You're right, you're right. I would hesitate to really express myself on this matter because I have no really background on this, but I would like to reiterate, I really do hope that both countries come together again and find a solution, because both countries need each other, and Canada is a big important country for India and the other way around. So I hope that at some stage they will find. We hear from the Canadian side now, expressing the hope that the diplomacy will find its role, and I hope that this will be the case.
All right. As I come to the concluding part of this interview, how do you see the next 10, 20, 30 years? Not just Indo-Germany, but more importantly, this cooperation that we're seeing from the West vis-a-vis India. Now, the cynical view would be that you're using India to try and counter China, but is that a trajectory you see the overall relations moving towards?
There is no doubt that India will gain enormous weight on the international stage, and it has to do with China, but is not limited to this China factor. It is a huge country, in many ways, and not only population-wise. We will find India as an indispensable partner to tackle the problems of the world. We talked about climate change. I think without India, you can forget any effort. So we need to sit together. And the good thing about India is you have so many, not only government institutions, but also non-governmental institutions like academia or think tanks or private sector, who are so engaged in this matter that it is very rewarding to deal with India. And I think Germany and Europe are on a good track when it comes to India right now, and I think we will intensify our cooperations with an always or ever growing partner on the international stage. And the G20, I must say again, has shown what India can deliver to the world, and therefore we are looking forward to working together more closely.
All right, Ambassador Ackermann, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News18.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your time.